Ex-wife who dumped me for caring for my sick dad. Now wants me back, with her friend's help. Okay, so here's the deal. My name's Ben, I'm 38, and until recently, I thought my life was pretty under control. You know, typical stuff. A house, a job, an ex-wife, and a dad who I was really close to. My ex Lisa and I have been split up for a bit now, but let me tell you, she's always been a piece of work. Anyway, this all started with my dad. He was everything to me. The guy had been struggling for a long time, battling kidney disease and heart failure. For the past year, it's been rough, man. I've been driving him to the clinic 3 times a week for dialysis treatments. That's what was keeping him alive, but it was like walking on thin ice, you know? Every time we went, I wondered if it would be his last. Lisa never understood this. Actually, understood is too nice a word. She didn't give a damn. We'd been together for years, but she's always been self-centered. The more my dad got sick, the more she started acting out. She hated that I was spending so much time with him. She'd say stuff like, "Why can't you just let him deal with it himself? You're always running off to take care of him." She made it sound like I was ditching her to go to the bar with the guys or something. It wasn't like that at all. My dad needed me, and I wasn't going to turn my back on him just because Lisa wanted me to notice her new hair color or some other dumb thing she did to get my attention. Now, don't get me wrong, I wasn't the perfect husband. But in my defense, it's hard to focus on her needs when I was worrying about whether my dad was going to make it through the week. The worst part was, Lisa didn't even try to pretend she cared about him. I'd get home after a long day with my dad and she'd be waiting for me at the door, arms crossed, looking like she was about to explode. "Where have you been? You know you promised to help me with dinner tonight, right?" She'd snap, like I was just off having fun somewhere. I'd tell her the same thing every time. "I was at the clinic with my dad, Lisa." But she didn't care. It was like talking to a wall. She'd just roll her eyes and walk away, muttering under her breath. This went on for months. Me taking care of dad, her getting more and more pissed that I wasn't around to cater to her every little need. It got to the point where I dread coming home. I loved my dad, but every time I dropped him off after dialysis, I'd sit in my car for a minute and think, do I really have to go home to this? And it wasn't just about me helping my dad. Lisa was obsessed with money, constantly bringing up how we didn't have enough, how we needed to buy a new car, how she wanted to go on fancy vacations like her friends. The thing is, I was already stressed out about bills. We weren't doing great financially, but I didn't want to bother my dad about it. He was already going through enough. Plus, the guy had worked his whole life for his money. He deserved to use it on himself, not on bailing me out of my own financial problems. But Lisa didn't see it that way. She'd say things like, "Your dad's sitting on all this cash and here we are barely scraping by. Why won't you just ask him for help?" I'd shut that down real quick. "I'm not asking my dying father for money, Lisa. If you want to live in a mansion, maybe you should go marry someone else." That usually shut her up, but not for long. One day, things hit a breaking point. I'd just gotten back from spending the entire day with my dad at the clinic. He was having a particularly rough time, and I didn't even know if he'd make it home. When I finally walked through the front door, Lisa was waiting for me, leaning against the hallway wall with that same annoyed look on her face. "Ben, we need to talk," she said, like she hadn't already been yelling at me every day for the past year. I sighed and asked, "What is it this time, Lisa?" I knew I was in for it, but I didn't expect what came next. She crossed her arms and went, "When are we going to get a new car? All my friends are driving new cars, and here we are in that old piece of junk. And don't even get me started on the house. It's embarrassing." I was speechless. Here I was, stressed out of my mind about my dad's health, and she was worried about keeping up with her friends? I lost it. "Are you serious right now? My dad's dying, Lisa, dying, and all you care about is a stupid car?" She didn't even flinch, just shrugged and said, "Well, if he's so rich, why isn't he helping you out? You're his son, aren't you? He can't take it with him when he goes, you know." That was it. That was the moment I knew we were done. I couldn't be with someone that heartless. I walked straight past her into our bedroom and grabbed her suitcase from the closet. I didn't care if it was late or if she had nowhere to go. I wasn't spending another night in the same house as her. I threw the suitcase on the bed and said, "Pack your things, Lisa. You're leaving tonight." At first, she laughed, like she thought I was joking. But when she saw the look on my face, she realized I was dead serious. She freaked out, of course, started yelling about how I couldn't kick her out, how half of everything was hers, blah, blah, blah. I didn't care. I was done. "Take whatever you want," I told her. "But you're not staying here another night." She stormed out, but not before calling her family. Next thing I knew, her parents and brother were banging on the door, demanding I let them in so they could help her pack. They tore through the house like they owned the place, grabbing anything they thought Lisa should take. By the time they left, the house was trashed. I didn't care though. I was just relieved she was finally gone. That night, as I sat in my empty house, surrounded by the mess they'd left behind, I felt a weird sense of relief. My life was falling apart. My dad was dying, my marriage was over, and I had no idea what the future held. But at least one thing was clear. I wasn't going to waste another minute on someone who didn't care about what really mattered. So a few weeks after I kicked Lisa out, things were finally starting to settle down, or at least I thought they were. I was still trying to get my head straight after everything that happened with her, and on top of that, I was dealing with my dad's condition. He was getting worse by the day, and we both knew the end was coming soon. I guess I was trying to prepare myself for it, but honestly, I don't think you ever really can. I got my divorce from Lisa, and I thought that was the end of it. Anyway, one day my dad's lawyer shows up at my house. At first I thought maybe something had already happened to my dad, but the lawyer was just there to talk about arrangements for when the time came. You know, funeral stuff, wills, all that. It was a hard conversation to have, but I was glad we were getting ahead of it. He sits me down and starts going over the paperwork. That's when he tells me, "Ben, your father left everything to you." Now, I knew my dad had some money, but I didn't realize just how much until that moment. The guy had saved up a pretty hefty amount over the years. I never asked him for a dime, even when Lisa was pushing me to, because I wanted him to use it for himself. But apparently, he had other plans. I remember sitting there, kind of shocked, like I was just trying to keep up with everything the lawyer was saying. Turns out, I was about to inherit a lot more than I expected. His house, his cars, a bunch of investments I didn't even know about, and a nice chunk of cash. The lawyer even handed me a check right there for some immediate expenses. It was a lot to take in. I mean, I went from stressing about paying bills to suddenly being pretty well off. But here's the thing. I wasn't thinking about the money. I was just trying to wrap my head around the fact that my dad wouldn't be around much longer. That's all I could focus on. So after the lawyer left, I was sitting at the kitchen table, just staring at this check. It felt unreal. I couldn't believe it. I kept thinking, my dad really trusted me with all of this. I have to do right by him. So after 2 weeks, my dad passed away, and after I got the call and before I could even process it all, guess who decides to show up? Yep, Lisa. I have no idea how she found out about the money. Maybe she had some sort of sixth sense when it came to cash. All I know is, it didn't take her long to come knocking at my door. And of course, she didn't even bother with any kind of small talk. No, she pushed her way inside like she still owned the place. She sat herself down on the couch, crossing her legs and looking at me like she was about to give me some kind of lecture. "I heard about your dad," she said in this fake, concerned voice that made my skin crawl. "I'm sorry for your loss." But before I could even respond, she dropped the real bomb. "I also heard about the inheritance." Now, I don't know what I was expecting her to say, but I definitely wasn't ready for what came next. "I think it's only fair that you give me half of the money," she said, like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. After all, we were married for years. I deserve a piece of it. I just stared at her, not even sure if I heard her right. I mean, we were divorced. She wasn't entitled to anything. But here she was, acting like she had a claim to money that didn't even exist when we were married. "You've got to be kidding me," I finally said, trying not to laugh. "That money has nothing to do with you. It's my dad's, and now it's mine. You're not getting a cent." But of course, Lisa wasn't about to take no for an answer. She got this smug look on her face and leaned back on the couch, crossing her arms. "Ben, you don't understand," she said like she was talking to a child. "If you don't give me what's fair, I'll take you to court. And trust me, I'll win." At that point, I was done. I stood up and told her to get out. I wasn't going to let her sit there and act like she had any power over me. We were done, and that meant she had no say in my life anymore. But she just stayed sitting there, staring at me with that same smug expression. "I'll be back," she said, standing up and walking towards the door. "And when I come back, I expect you to have my half ready, or you'll regret it." She slammed the door on her way out, leaving me standing there, stunned. I knew Lisa was greedy, but I didn't think she'd stoop this low. I should have known better. After she left, I tried to calm myself down, but it wasn't easy. My head was spinning. I knew she was serious about coming after the money, and I didn't trust her to play fair. She was going to do whatever it took to get what she wanted, and that meant I needed to be ready. The next few days were quiet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. And sure enough, I was right. A week later, I started getting harassed. It started small. Random phone calls from unknown numbers, people hanging up as soon as I answered. Then, things escalated. One night, I came home and found a brick had been thrown through my front window. I called the cops, but there wasn't much they could do. I didn't have any proof it was Lisa or her family, but I knew they were behind it. And that was just the beginning. A few days after the brick incident, I came home late from work and noticed something strange. There were muddy footprints leading up to my front door. I hadn't been home all day, and I definitely didn't leave those tracks. I unlocked the door and walked inside, my heart pounding. The house was a mess. Someone had broken in, gone through my things, and trashed the place. The worst part, whoever it was, they didn't take anything. It wasn't a robbery. It was a message. I knew this was Lisa and her family trying to scare me, trying to make me give in. But I wasn't about to let them win. I filed another police report, but again, nothing came of it. At this point, I knew I had to be on high alert. Lisa wasn't just going to walk away quietly. She wanted that money, and she'd do whatever it took to get it, even if that meant making my life a living hell. So things had been getting real bad since Lisa found out about my inheritance. I had this constant knot in my stomach, always waiting for the next thing her or her crazy family would do. It was like living in a nightmare that just wouldn't end. One night, I was exhausted from the long day, just doing regular stuff, picking up the kids from school, work, trying to act like everything was normal. But in the back of my mind, I knew things weren't right. I had already replaced the window they smashed, and I thought maybe they'd ease up for a bit, but I was wrong. It was around 2:30 in the morning, and I was dead asleep. I woke up to this loud banging sound. At first I thought it was something outside, maybe the wind knocking something over. But then I heard it again, louder this time. It was coming from the front door. I jumped out of bed, my heart racing, and went downstairs. Whoever it was wasn't just knocking. They were slamming their fists against the door like they were trying to break it down. I peeked through the window and, surprise, surprise, it was Lisa's brother, Jerome. Jerome had always been a bit off. The guy's a hothead, and he's always been way too protective of Lisa, even when she's dead wrong. I knew letting him in wasn't an option, but before I could even think of what to do, he started shouting through the door. "Ben, open the damn door. We know you're in there. Don't make me break this thing down." I could tell he wasn't just here for a friendly chat. The way he was acting, there was no way he was leaving without causing some damage. I could feel the panic building up, but I tried to stay calm. I wasn't about to let this guy intimidate me in my own home. "Get out of here, Jerome! You're not coming in!" I shouted through the door, hoping he'd just leave. But of course, that didn't work. Instead of leaving, I heard the sound of glass shattering. Jerome had picked up one of my patio chairs and smashed it through the living room window. It was like everything happened in slow motion after that. The glass exploded everywhere, and I heard the footsteps as he climbed through the broken window into my house. I had no choice. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the biggest knife I could find, and stood there, ready for whatever was about to happen. I wasn't trying to be a hero or anything, but there was no way I was going to let him hurt me or my kids. They were upstairs, still asleep, thank God. But the last thing I wanted was for them to come downstairs and see their uncle tearing up the house. Jerome stormed into the kitchen, his face red and his eyes wild. He looked at the knife in my hand and just smirked. "What, you gonna stab me, Ben? You don't have it in you," he said, stepping closer. I held my ground, gripping the knife tighter. "Get out, Jerome, I'm warning you." But he just laughed and shoved me aside like I was nothing. "You're gonna give Lisa what she deserves or I'll make sure you regret it." That's when I snapped. Everything I'd been holding in, the stress, the fear, the anger, it all came rushing out at once. I lunged at Jerome, knocking him off balance and slamming him into the fridge. He didn't see it coming. We struggled for a few seconds, and I could feel my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode. But I managed to get him in a headlock and shoved him toward the door. "Get out!" I shouted, half expecting him to fight back harder. But I guess he realized I wasn't messing around anymore. He stumbled through the door, cursing me out as he went, but he didn't try to come back inside. I slammed the door behind him, locked it, and stood there for a second, just trying to catch my breath. My hands were shaking, and I couldn't believe what had just happened. I'd never been in a situation like that before, where I actually had to fight someone in my own home. It was terrifying, but at the same time, I felt this weird sense of relief. I had finally stood up to Jerome, and I wasn't backing down anymore. But as soon as I started to calm down, the reality hit me. This wasn't over. If Jerome was willing to break into my house, what was next? I had to protect my kids, and I had to make sure this never happened again. The first thing I did was call the cops. They came out pretty fast, took my statement, and I told them everything. The brick, the threats, Jerome breaking in, it all came pouring out. The officer looked at me like he'd seen this kind of thing before and nodded along as I talked. "We'll file a report," he said, "but you might want to think about getting a restraining order." A restraining order. I couldn't believe it had come to that. But I knew he was right. These people were unhinged, and there was no telling what they'd do next. I needed to do everything I could to keep them away from me and my kids. The next morning, after barely sleeping, I went straight to the courthouse and filed for the restraining order. I also got some security cameras installed around the house. I wasn't about to let these psychos catch me off guard again. Every little sound after that had me jumping, but at least I felt like I had a little more control. For a few days, things were quiet. I hadn't heard from Lisa or Jerome, and I thought maybe the restraining order scared them off. But then, I got a letter in the mail. It was from a lawyer. Lisa was officially taking me to court. She was suing me for half of my dad's inheritance, claiming that as my ex-wife, she was entitled to it. I couldn't believe it. This woman had no shame. She was really trying to get her hands on money that had nothing to do with her. I felt sick to my stomach, but at the same time, I was ready for the fight. If she thought she was going to bully me into giving her what she wanted, she had another thing coming. I called my own lawyer and we started preparing. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't about to let her win. I had already lost enough: my dad, my peace, my sense of safety. The one thing I wasn't going to lose was my dignity. The court date was set for a few weeks later, and as the day got closer, I could feel the tension building. Lisa wasn't backing down, and her family was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for their chance to strike. But I was ready this time. I wasn't afraid anymore. This was my fight now, and I wasn't going to let them take anything else from me. I thought things were finally calming down. After filing for the restraining order, dealing with the police, and preparing for the court case, I figured Lisa and her family had to get the message that I wasn't going to back down. I was wrong. Turns out, I had seriously underestimated just how far they were willing to go. It was about a week before the court date, and I decided to take a trip to the cemetery to visit my dad's grave. I hadn't been there since the funeral, and I felt like I needed some time to clear my head, away from all the noise and chaos. The court stuff, the break-in, all of it was wearing me down. Visiting my dad's resting place seemed like a good way to center myself, to remember why I was fighting so hard to protect what he left me. I drove out to the cemetery in the afternoon. The place was quiet, peaceful even. It was one of those spots tucked away from the busy parts of town, with old trees lining the paths and hardly anyone around. When I got to my dad's grave, though, something felt off right away. From a distance, I could see that something wasn't right. His tombstone. It didn't look the same. As I got closer, I realized why. The tombstone was shattered, completely destroyed. There were chunks of stone scattered everywhere, and someone had spray painted on the ground, right in front of the grave. The words were clear as day. The money is hers. Pay up or this keeps happening. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Who does that? Who disrespects the dead like that just to send some messed up message? I stood there, staring at the ruins of my dad's tombstone, my hands shaking with anger. This wasn't just about the money anymore. They were going after my dad, after his memory. That's when it really hit me. Lisa's family didn't care about boundaries. They didn't care about respect. They only cared about getting what they thought they were owed. For a second, I thought about just giving in, handing over the money to make it stop. But then I remembered my dad. He worked hard his whole life, saved every penny, and trusted me to do the right thing with it. He wouldn't want me to roll over for these people. No way. I took out my phone and snapped a picture of the scene, my hands still trembling. Then I called the police. Again. I felt like I was on the phone with them every other day at this point. When the officer arrived, he looked almost as stunned as I was. "Wow," he said, shaking his head as he took in the sight. "I've seen vandalism, but this is different." "Yeah," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's personal." We walked around the grave and I showed him the spray paint on the ground. The officer scribbled in his notebook and told me they'd increase patrols around the cemetery at night. But honestly, I didn't have much faith that they'd catch these people. It's not like they were leaving any fingerprints or ID cards behind. I went to the cemetery office afterward and paid for a new tombstone. It wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. My dad deserved better than this, and I was going to make sure he had a proper resting place, no matter how many times these psychos decided to mess with it. The whole drive home, my mind was spinning. How far were Lisa and her family going to take this? The thought of them desecrating my dad's grave again made my skin crawl, but I couldn't let them win. I couldn't let them see that they were getting to me. When I got home, the kids were still at school, so I had some time to think. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, debating whether to call Lisa. I knew it wouldn't do any good, but part of me wanted to scream at her, to demand she stop all this. But then again, that's probably exactly what she wanted. She wanted me rattled. She wanted me desperate enough to pay her off. Instead, I sent her a text. I kept it simple. "You're disgusting. Vandalizing my dad's grave? You've hit a new low. This won't work. You're not getting a dime." She didn't respond. No surprise there. I imagined her sitting with her family plotting their next move, laughing about what they'd done. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. But I couldn't let my anger control me. I had to stay focused on the court case, on making sure I had all my facts straight, so Lisa didn't have a chance in hell of winning. A few days passed, and things were quiet. No phone calls, no bricks, no creepy messages taped to my front door. It was almost like they were waiting for something, and that made me even more nervous. The court date was coming up fast, and I knew they were gearing up for a final push to break me. The night before the court hearing, I could barely sleep. Every little noise in the house made me jump. I kept imagining Jerome smashing through another window or worse, showing up at the cemetery again to destroy the new tombstone I'd ordered. But morning came, and nothing happened. No more vandalism, no more threats. Just silence. When I walked into the courtroom the next day, there was Lisa, sitting with her lawyer. She didn't even look at me, but I could feel the tension radiating off her. This was it. We were finally going to settle this in front of a judge. As the hearing started, her lawyer tried to paint me as this greedy, selfish guy who was hiding my dad's money from her. He claimed that, as my ex-wife, Lisa was entitled to half of the inheritance, even though our divorce had been finalized long before my dad passed away. But my lawyer was ready. He pointed out that Lisa had no legal claim to the money. It was all left to me, and there was no provision in the divorce agreement that gave her any rights to it. The judge listened to both sides, nodding every once in a while, but his expression never changed. And then it was over. The judge ruled in my favor. Lisa wasn't getting anything. I could see the anger in her eyes as the judge delivered his decision. She stood up, glaring at me from across the room. I thought she might explode right there in the courtroom, but she just turned and stormed out, her lawyer trailing behind her. I won the case, but I knew this wasn't the end. Lisa wasn't the type to give up so easily. She'd be back, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. So I won in court, right? You'd think that would be the end of it. I mean, the judge ruled that Lisa wasn't getting a dime of my dad's inheritance, and honestly, I thought that would finally shut her up. But no, I should have known better. With Lisa and her family, nothing is ever simple. Even with the legal win, they weren't done making my life hell. The first sign that things weren't over came just a couple days after the court ruling. I'd just gotten home from work, and the kids were with their mom for the weekend. It was one of those rare moments where the house was quiet, and I could actually sit down for a second. I made myself some coffee, sat down on the couch, and for the first time in what felt like months, I actually started to relax. That peace didn't last long. Around 7 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was a spam message, but when I opened it, my heart sank. "You may have won in court, but this isn't over. You'll pay one way or another." I knew right away it was from Lisa or one of her family members. I could feel the anger boiling up again, but I tried to push it down. It was just another empty threat, right? They were mad they lost in court and were trying to scare me. I told myself it was nothing, that they couldn't touch me now. But deep down, I knew better. The next couple of days were weird. I started noticing strange things around the house. Small stuff, like things being moved around. I'd come home and the back gate would be wide open, even though I always made sure to lock it. Then there were the knocks at the door, usually late at night, but when I went to check, no one was there. It was little things like that, just enough to make me feel on edge, but not enough to call the cops about. Then one night, things escalated. It was around 3 a.m., and I woke up to this loud crashing sound. It was like someone was throwing rocks at my house. My heart was pounding as I jumped out of bed and looked out the window. Sure enough, there were a couple of figures standing in my front yard, throwing bricks at my house. They didn't even care that I might see them. They wanted me to see. They wanted me to know it was them. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 as I ran downstairs. I wasn't thinking straight, just running on adrenaline. By the time I got to the front door, I saw them speeding off in a black car. But they didn't just leave me with broken windows. They'd spray-painted the front of my house with the word "thief" in giant red letters. When the cops finally showed up, I felt completely drained. I was pissed off, but mostly I was tired. Tired of the threats, the damage, the constant harassment. The officers took my statement, but again, there wasn't much they could do. They told me to install more security cameras, file for another restraining order, the usual stuff, but none of it felt like enough. That was the night I realized Lisa and her family were never going to stop. I had tried to play by the rules, to go through the courts, to get the restraining orders, but none of it was working. They didn't care about laws or boundaries. They were going to keep coming at me until I gave them what they wanted, or until they pushed me to the edge. The next morning, I went out to clean up the mess. There were pieces of brick scattered all over the front yard, and the spray paint was still glaring at me from the front wall. Thief! It was almost funny at this point, considering they were the ones trying to steal from me. As I was cleaning up, my neighbor, Mr. Rayner, came over. He's this old guy, probably in his late 70s, and he's always been friendly with me. We didn't talk much, but he'd wave when I was out mowing the lawn or say hi if we ran into each other at the grocery store. He looked at the damage and shook his head. "Damn shame," he said. "Saw them doing it last night, but I didn't want to get involved." I sighed, rubbing my forehead. "Yeah, I don't blame you. This whole thing's been a nightmare." Mr. Rayner nodded, then paused like he was thinking about something. "You know, Ben," he said slowly, "I've got an old friend in town who used to be a private investigator. He might be able to help you, look into these people, see if there's anything you can use against them." At first, I wasn't sure. Hiring a PI seemed like something out of a crime show, not real life. But at that point, I was desperate. I needed to do something. So I told Mr. Rayner I'd think about it. And the next day, I gave his friend a call. The PI, a guy named Mike, came by the house the day after. He wasn't what I expected. Just a regular-looking guy, not the trench coat-wearing type you see in the movies. We sat down and I told him everything. The harassment, the court case, the vandalism. I didn't leave anything out. Mike listened quietly, nodding as I talked. When I was done, he said, "Sounds like these people won't stop until they're either scared off or locked up. Let's see what we can dig up on them." Over the next week, Mike did his thing. He followed Lisa's family, looked into their backgrounds, and even did some digging into their finances. What he found wasn't shocking. Turns out Lisa's family was deep in debt. They were desperate, and the inheritance was their way out. But the most interesting thing he found was a record of some shady dealings Lisa's brother, Jerome, had been involved in. Nothing concrete, but enough to get the police more interested. Armed with Mike's info, I went to the police again, and this time, they actually took it seriously. They started investigating Jerome and the rest of the family more closely, and within a few weeks, they found enough evidence to charge him with multiple crimes, including vandalism, harassment, and even some fraud stuff. When Jerome was arrested, everything changed. The harassment stopped. The bricks, the phone calls, the threats, all of it just disappeared. Lisa and her family went quiet. I guess they finally realized they were in too deep. It wasn't the ending I expected, but it was the one I got. After Jerome was taken down, Lisa stopped coming after me. She didn't have the backup anymore, and I think she knew she was out of options. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again.